Welcome to the Scale Ups podcast, where each week you get to hear Sean Steele, professional CEO, growth mentor, and advisory board chair, unpack the strategies that successful founders have used to achieve scale in their businesses. Stay tuned as he interviews the entrepreneurs who've made it, learns from industry experts, and follows a group of founders still striving to scale.
G'day everyone, and welcome to the Scale Ups podcast, where we help first-time founders learn the secrets of scaling so they can fulfill the potential of their business and create bigger impact in the world and make bigger decisions with greater confidence. I'm your host, Sean Steele, and I am joined today by Marc Meili, and I've just discovered, Marc, that your last name means beautiful in Chinese. That's quite impressive as a last name. I don't think I've got any such antidotes for Steele. I'm pretty sure it just means steel.
Well, at least I got something going for me then.
No, great start. Points on the board. And Marc is the managing director of Protech Group and Cernova. How are you today, Marc? Are you good?
Yes, yeah. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me today. So I'm actually looking forward to having a chat with you. It's a first-time podcast for me. So surprised me.
Mate, that surprises me. I mean, you and I have actually known each other for probably 4 years, I'd say, something like that. Now we went through YPO in Queensland, and I actually had no idea that your business was as large as it was. And so I think in our last conversation around the business, I was staggered. So I'm also staggered that this is your first podcast. But welcome, and we've always had some great conversations, and I really look forward to, even though your business is probably much larger than many of our audience, you've been on this journey from the start. And so, you got a lot of learnings from a lot of different stages in the growth of your company, and some really fascinating ones I know that will be relevant to anyone who's listening at any level as they're going through this process. So maybe for those who aren't familiar with Protech Group, you kicked off in 2006, and you are a technically specialized workforce solutions partner. Is that the right way to explain it?
Yeah. So essentially a staffing firm.
Yep.
We provide on-hire labor into projects. Some of that labor is permanent, employed by us. Some of that labor is on a casual basis. It varies the assignments, but essentially, yes, we focus on technical industries, and we're on an on-demand skill capability / organization that provide the skills and the capacity to organization delivering projects.
And what's a technical industry from the way that you sort of describe it internally?
Anything technical, I suppose. Anything where things are getting built,
Okay.
and that's the building, construction industry, civil construction industry. It's a mining industry. It's engineering, electrical. Wherever things are getting built or things are moving parts and all that. So that's what we classify as technical industries.
Yeah. Wow. And so the business now, Marc, can you just share with the audience, like what's the size of the business this year, or where do you think you'll finish this year in terms of sort of revenue and employee size?
Yeah, so this year actually it staggers me sometimes myself. So we employ over 4,000 people in that casual permanent capacity across the nation. We have 25 locations where we operate from, and then deploy and manage our people and mobilize them and support them in the process. We are only Australia-based, so that was a decision I made deliberate at one point in the trajectory of the company. So we're touching on 400 million in revenue, and we'll be writing a $500 million budget next financial year. So,
wow.
So we're seeing a big boost again over the last couple of years. Yes,
that's incredible. I would love for you to come back to that decision. I'd like to give you a bit of a sort of a bit of a story about the genesis of the business to start with, but I'd really like to come back to your strategic decision also to stay in Australia, because I'm sure there's lots of businesses when they're scaling up who are thinking about how am I going to continue these growth rates, and is this market too small? And you've obviously made some big decisions there. So let's come back to that. Can you take me back to 2006? What led you to start the business in the first place?
2006. Look, I was working for an organization and at the time, and I was very privileged because I was running someone else's business, Hollis and Bowlers. I had full responsibility and no accountability in that context, and that was really very enjoyable for me, and I'm still very grateful for that experience that I was given at the time, and the trust, I suppose, that I received. But I think one thing led to the other. The owners ultimately wanted to come back into the business after a period of time and actually be involved in the business. And at that point, I thought, well, this is great, but I really want to do my own thing. And I finished an MBA at the time as well, and I was sort of had a concentration in entrepreneurship, and I chose to go my own path and go into recruitment. And why into recruitment or workforce provision is it's I thought, I don't know much, but I know much about people in various different industries and diverse environments. I've had the privilege to work in various parts in the world. I've been privy to different cultures and different work experiences, and I saw that I guess the managerial requirements were all the same. It was about the quality of the people they have in their business, and that ultimately makes them strive. And I was no different. And at the time, I was on the receiving end of those services in the recruitment space, also in the workforce management space, and I had a mission to deliver, and I wasn't really receiving the support at the time that was to my standard. And that's where I saw the opportunity. I'd never done this before, which is a little bit wild. But I knew I had the business acumen. I knew what's required in the industry to deliver those outcomes. So I literally started from day one with a laptop in actually the company I was leading there at the time, and I started off in the broom chamber. And we kind of did a counter deal for 6 months where I was able to establish myself and sponge off the organization.
Awesome.
To get myself going. And after 6 months, we're a team of 5, and then we moved out and started our own journey. So it's very fond memories of that.
Yeah.
early parts.
The funny thing is, you talk about it like it's a really long time ago, but in the context of building a business, this is 16 years ago, and you've now got 4,000 employees, which is staggering. Can some of the things that we touched on in our chat the other day was one of the things I really want to dig into was how you thought about differentiation in this market. And you talked to me about your approach to your brand promise around providing, quality on demand, but doing it every time. And this is a really challenging proposition for many services businesses that may be in an industry where they're actually finding it pretty hard to differentiate. And somebody says, well, why don't you differentiate on quality? And they're kind of like, well, doesn't everybody do quality? Like, how do you do that differently in a defendable way that actually becomes something that people would actually attach your brand to, because it's a big call, right? To be able to deliver that every time. If you don't deliver every time, it's not going to become part of your brand. Can you just tell me about that? Because it sounded like that was something relatively early in your thinking that's really shaped the future of the company.
Yes, definitely. And the quality of the people was my key issue on the receiving end, I suppose. And no matter what you receive from a service provider, if the quality of the work or the product is not up to standard to what the client expects, and they're required to do their work or enjoyment or whatever it is, ultimately that you won't receive a repeat purchase. So really, it was quite simple to making sure. In principle, it was simple, and the brand promise, delivering quality people and quality people every time was from day one. The part that wasn't so simple was how do you do that in a most reliable and repeatable way,
Yeah.
in a larger scale, because that was from day one in my head. I was never going to have call it a lifestyle business. So it's a big decision in that either you build a lifestyle business where you build a business that creates you a certain income, you have certain freedoms around it, or you build a growth business, and that's a different choice. So now I was always going to build a growth business because I know myself that I want to learn, continue to grow myself, And in order to do so, I had to have a growth business, and I would be bored with a lifestyle business where I play golf twice a week or whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a deliberate choice for people to make. So in a growth business, everything I was thinking of was, all right, what do I need to do to make this scalable? Because ultimately to grow a business, it's two things. There's a formula how to make a buck, I suppose. A plus B equals C or whatever. And is it scalable? And if it's scalable, then everything else can be engineered around it. So my background is engineering and manufacturing, and for years I've been working on better, faster, cheaper, and essentially building process to deliver a predictable outcome. So I guess I've taken that mindset into the recruitment industry and said, well, I need to build process to make sure that quality people every time is assured. And we have done this in initial foundations. Then over the years, we have refined it, and to our own detriment in a way, because it's very difficult for someone to gain employment with us these days because of the hurdles they have to go through. But saying that, we have proven through that process and being very rigorous with a very long-term view about things rather than quick wins, that long-term, we want to build a reputation of an organization that delivers the quality of service and the quality of people to their operations. And so I was very clear on that, and I knew that it was a longer road. I knew it was a harder road, and I needed to convince the people around me that this is the right thing to do. And look, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but because you do feel or follow your gut sometimes in business. But that's what our organization is known for. We are known for a quality organization. And it is part of our success, no doubt about it, because the reliability of the services and the delivery we have, they can count on, and they know it's differentiated from the others.
Are you able to share, Mark, I don't want you to give away any trade secrets, but are you able to share any examples of how that turns up in practice? Like, how other people might recruit, because you're having to recruit on a large scale on a constant basis. And so, people, of course, in the current environment are going, geez, I'm finding it hard enough to get, a couple of applications for key jobs. And so I know this is a bit of a unique labor market, and you would have seen a whole bunch of different sort of labor markets over 16 years. But what are some practical examples of how you actually do that differently, where other people would have given up by then or not gone to that level, or not put in that level of effort to get that person?
And yeah, look, we do things differently, and it costs more. And I think that's the key point. There's a tension of doing a good job. And then you need to align that good job with the right marketing in order to obtain better returns from your clients. In that sense, we are more expensive than our competitors in some ways, but there's some tangible stuff, and we're talking about people here, right? So I'm happy to share a couple things. So, but years ago, we implemented, very in the early days, before the corporates even mandated this, but we implemented drug testing. And we trained our people and certified our people to do drug testing in our offices. And the reason why I did that, because the statistics were clear that users of drugs, or ongoing users of drugs, or people who use drugs often, there's a quality issue, and in a sense, so there were statistics about the safety behavior of those people and the incidence rate, but there was also the statistic of reliability around the people and in my brand, I wanted the most reliable and the most safe people. So for me, it was a no-brainer. Put this into place, and absolutely, we screen out a lot of people, and especially even more back in the early days, because the corporates around us, they were just discovering that themselves. Right. But I always stayed the course, and it was an investment we made. And again, it's sometimes very untangible to go, oh, we do this and this is that. It's the belief in the brand, it's the belief in the system, it's a belief in the direction forward. That was one cornerstone. So because that's a behavioral check also. People choose to do whatever they do, and I'm not here to criticize what they do, but into the world of work, that's a choice you make, and you either make that choice or that choice, and I want the people to make that choice. That
Mm-hmm.
was one element. We have other elements in our offices where we assess physical capacity of people. So we have medicinal screens where we make sure that people don't have pre-existing condition, and then we put them into jobs that will aggravate those pre-existing conditions. So again, it's a protection factor for the people themselves, but for ourselves as well, that we're not putting someone in a position that they might aggravate a shoulder that has an issue and so forth. And that doesn't necessarily mean deselect, but it means redeploy into a different profession or a different kind of work.
Mm.
So we made sure that this gets assessed physically. And look, over the years, things evolved, and our latest addition to that is the actual the subconscious. So we assess behaviors in terms of interviewing and all that sort of stuff. We assess the physical elements of the people, and the new things over the last 12 months we have implemented fully across the organization is the brain, how we behave unconsciously, and how our mental resilience is to the workplace. So there's a number
Wow.
of things, but there's 10 elements we do, and that's why I mentioned before, it's really hard to get a job with us.
Yeah.
But we do know that the people who join us in the end after the evaluation, they're the people we want to have on the bus, and they're the people we want to represent our brand and work with us.
I think people in the IT sector they'd be like, oh, well, that's pretty normal. I went for a job at Microsoft and I had 8 interviews, and I went for a job at Google and I had 12, and the level of screening to get the highest quality people has to be there. If there's no bars, then there's no bars to jump over, and you sort of get whatever you get, right? And to your point, that might be a strategy that works for someone's business, but if you want to have a brand that's around quality and long-term orientation with your clients, then they're going to have to be able to depend on that. And so I love that you're putting real rigorous processes in place to ensure that becomes a predictable part of your brand.
And it required leadership, because everyone was doing whatever they were doing. We set the new benchmark, and we set literally our own benchmark. And still today, we still set our own benchmark. And as I mentioned before, sometimes you could think in a skill shortage like we're in right now, it's very unprecedented where we're at. You get pressure from the organization. You go, can we negotiate some of those elements? And for me, they're not negotiable in that sense, because we know they work. But they clearly evolve over time as well, that we have been able to take certain elements more in the online environment, and to facilitate easier checking, easier testing for our candidates and on our clients involved in that as well. So there's an involvement, but the rigidity of the process remains, and we're the only ones doing it. So because we're the only ones doing it, sometimes the organization goes, well, but we burden ourselves, for what? Because no one else is doing it. And I'm going, well, no one else is growing the organization to the rate we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I imagine those conversations have come up so many times over the years, where you've got, ambitious managers and leaders who've seen an opportunity and we don't quite have what we need. And if we just relax a little bit, this same thing happens in education, where businesses are like, well, if we actually made those assessments a little easier, more students would get through. And you're like, yeah, but do they know what they need to know to actually do what they need to do on the other side of that? If you start to drop those standards, which, a lot of universities, anyway, I won't talk about them. But in the context of people, one of the things that you share with me, and I'd love to just hear your thoughts on, everybody has this earlier stage challenge when they're particularly in that sort of, sub 20, 30, 40 mil stage, where they want the best talent. They know they need great people, but there's a question about whether they can afford it. And, at what point do you take a stake and get a really, high caliber, but expensive person, and can you afford it at the time, and what does that do for your business? And I know you had some learnings around that. Can you share us your thoughts around the way that you've built team and the way that you've thought about attracting and then making decisions around top talent?
Yeah, so the early stage, it is clearly a tension, because it's difficult to attract top players when he's small. And the reason for that is multifold. One is money, because you think you can't afford it. The other one is also the perception of the person who's going to join you. The larger you get, the more stable your peer and the more safe your peer as an employer to create a career within and so forth. So, so really in the beginning, you have not much going for yourself other than storytelling and being visionary about it, and ultimately building that vision with a prospective candidate. But my experience in terms of that was one element, is to hone in on the story and really being able to share that with prospective uh, future partners you're going to work with, that they want to be part of this exciting journey and part of that experience. But then the original intention I had, it was the money. I just couldn't afford the people I really wanted. But funnily enough, I could afford to have lots of failed people I probably didn't want in the process. And then I realized that the amount of money I was spending on wasting on people that really didn't cut the mark was in excess to what a good talented person would have cost me. And then at some point, ultimately, I made the leap of faith, and I paid significant more than what the market was meant to pay. And it was just one of these wonderful experiences, because I suddenly wasn't alone anymore. I suddenly had wingmen and wingwomen with me in the business, where I go, wow, this is just amazing. I can actually rely on these people to do the same, or if not even better than what I would do. And that created a huge amount of momentum at that very moment, where I really was able to get the right quality people in my own business, because I afforded and invested into these people, and the return was multifold. It was not even a question.
Yeah.
If we have the right people, you can pay them almost as much as you want, and they will return it in that context. But that was very significant for me to understand that if you have the right people, you need to pay the right money. Because as an
Which
owner of
roles
a
did
small
you?
business,
So, which roles did you double
and
down on first? Like, what were the first couple?
look, the first roles were, I guess, like in any business, especially when you're smaller, right? That you can't really do anything unless you have money. So you need to have the sales. So that's where it starts. It needs to come in on the front door. So it was really in the sales arena where I started to making that investment. And then as the sales started to flow through, suddenly quite significantly, I had to make sure I shore up the back end as well in the operation and the delivery space. So so these were sort of the roles, but sales first, and that, as I said, that made entirely a huge difference. But it wasn't. They also had to buy into the story. They wouldn't just join us for the money, as no one does,
Yes.
because they actually want to be part of something exciting, part of something that guides their own future and makes their future a growth career. And I still have people in my business from those early days, and they're still top performers today.
Yeah. Amazing.
Based on that investment, probably 13 years ago.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, when you think about this journey, I mean, no journey is no business journey looks like it did in the spreadsheet that you built around the plan of what you thought you were going to do. It's incredible in a spreadsheet. It's just perfectly aligned, and it's a wonderful straight line. But I'm sure it was lumpy along the way. When you think back though to some of the outside people and outside building your systems around quality, and therefore getting repeat customers, getting longer term customers, being able to charge premium pricing, all of these things you obviously fit very well together. Were there other decisions that when you reflect on it, that you made that you feel like really accelerated the trajectory of the business, or sort of unlocked further scalability in it?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a number of elements in it. Yes, look. So where do I start? I guess there was one particular time in our journey where there was something was happening in the market space that really never has happened. The one of the largest competitors, or we weren't even a competitor really, but some of the largest organization was taken over by a smaller firm, and it wasn't done with good strategy, and it wasn't really executed well. And I saw this opportunity coming. I saw this was unfolding, and very early on, I was starting to, I guess, to really get the intel out of that organization, and then was sort of envisaging what may would happen if it does happen. And and it was one of these once in a lifetime's opportunity where I saw, well, there's a really bad merger about to happen, and there will be blood. And when this happens, this creates huge opportunities, I guess, in terms of people joining me on my journey from a poor business decision and poor execution of someone else. And I saw this coming, and it was a little bit, I guess I was a little bit testing in a sense, because I actually, in my own head, I created an entire plan, as you mentioned. We do a plan, and this will unfold. And I did this 6 months before this acquisition actually was happening and unfolding. And then I remember I was talking to my executive team, and I had a very detailed plan. And just to put it in context, I pretty much said we'll double the company over the next 6 months by employing people. So that was quite staggering. And at the time we were probably about 50 staff or so. And then I said, well, the next 6 months we're going to be 100. We're going to make all that investment, and then this will happen. And I've done all the numbers across the nation, and my exec team looked at me and said, he's lost it. He's lost it. I don't know where he's coming from. That this is a huge risk. But it wasn't for me. I felt it was a managed risk, the way I put the plan together. And I'm not a risk taker. People often look to entrepreneurs and goes, oh, you must be a risk taker. I would classify my far from it. I manage risks. I don't take risks. I can't afford to take risks. And yes, sometimes things don't go your way, and sometimes you have a loss somewhere, but it's still part of the risk management plan. And if you never lose more than 10 to 15% or whatever, then that's manageable. So we had this plan. No one wanted it, and that's where probably sometimes defining moment. I remember ultimately I was quite angry. I was like, why can't they see it? Why can't they see what I see, and why are they not on board? And that was one of the moments which I'm usually not. I'm very an inclusive and a servant leader by nature. But I said, guys, this is it. This will never happen in my lifetime again. This is our breaking point. You're either with me or you're against me. And it's either with me or the highway. So you can choose what you want to do. But this is the plan. So you go home, you think about it, and we'll resume on Monday. That was on a Friday. And we get back in and say, you're either with me or not. And look, and to the credit of the team, some of the team members came for more information, which I might have not, been in detail. And then on Monday, we're all on board, and we did it. And that was a defining moment, Sean. That really leaped us through one of those hurdles in business we all experience, where you suddenly have a brick wall and you get stuck into it. And that, in hindsight, I didn't think about all these sort of things, to be honest. I just saw the opportunity. I thought we must do this, and we did. And it's been a cornerstone of our growth of the organization today, no doubt.
I love that. And one of the things I love about that is when you are, every leader has a different sort of nature. And I, like you, am very consultative and collaborative. And I remember I had one of my teams away on a retreat somewhere. We were, workshopping this and that, bonding and so on. And we had this sort of start, stop, continue session. Okay, we're all giving each other feedback and all the rest. And the team's feedback to me was, Sean, we love that you include us, and we love that you seek our opinion. And we would also like to give you 5 or 6 JFDIs a year. And I was like, oh, what's a JFDI? And it was just, swear word, just do it. Like, when you've got an instinct, when you say, hey guys, we need to go, we will be behind you 100% of the way. Don't feel like you need to over consult on us. If you have that much conviction, it's great that you consult to us on so many other things, but also you're the leader and we want you to lead. And so when you feel like it, go for it. Don't do it every day, but when it's required, just give it to us. And that was actually really empowering for me. And I can imagine your team was like, okay, well, this that's when your relationship and your servant leadership in all the previous stages comes to bear, doesn't it? Because they're going to have your back, because they know that your style is to actually back them and encourage them and empower them. And it's rare that you're going to make a call like that. And so if you've got that much instinct around it, get behind it.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. That's where you have different style of leaderships require at different times in your business. Sometimes you do have just to make the captain call on certain things because yes, you consult and you try to find 100% alignment of everyone in the process, but sometimes you have to make the call, and that happens in all stages of business, and no doubt throughout the last 2 years. 2 years ago, just about on the date, I would think. We all had to operate in a different way, and there wasn't much give and take. It was about this is what's going to happen now, and this is how we need to do it. And interestingly, as you just mentioned, through that period of time, the last 2 years, on that very moment, and 2 years ago, the people wanted exactly that, because that was the leadership, not just from me, but from my direct team to the entire organization, where they looked for stability and safety.
That's right.
And that's also is important.
Yeah. Clarity and transparency quickly, like confident, assured. Doesn't mean that you need to know everything, and you certainly don't make things up. It's like, hey, this is what it is. This is what's happening. This is what we're going to do. People get safety from that. I agree.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm really interested in the fact that you've chosen to stay in Australia, because of course, when everybody, typical strategic planning session, and you're putting all the options on the table, okay, new products, new customers, new markets, etc. You're going through your evaluation of all the different opportunities, partnerships, joint ventures, whatever it is. International, of course, always comes up on the table from different time to time. I'm sure it's been on your strategic discussion list from time to time. What's made you choose Australia? Like, how did you think about that? Has it reared its head multiple times? When did you sort of make that decision? How and why did you make that decision?
Yes, look, exactly, because if you have a growth mindset, you're thinking this and you're thinking that. And I made the decision. I actually had a very clear plan, and I had a clear plan to expand into the US. Already had an acquisition in mind at the time that would have been very fitting of what we were planning to do to create the foundation and all that. And then, funnily enough, I guess as a founder and a privately owned organization, there's personal choices come into your business choices also. So a part of that choice was, because I started this business from scratch. I started some of our main operations myself through fly in, fly out in Sydney, in Melbourne, in Perth, where for months on end I was on a plane. I was away from Monday to Friday, and I had a growing family at the same time. I had 3 young children, and then the decision came out. Geez, that stretch between Australia and the US is a bit longer than just a couple hours flight. And that commitment. So that was one aspect, but probably the key aspect was I started to realize what I had on hand here in Australia. I started to realize I was like, well, we are actually having a really, really good business, and why would I possibly risk, because it was me who would have to do that overseas, this really solid engine here, when I know I can double down. If we are going to double down here, and I'll come to that in a second, what double down meant for me, but then I know this business will grow significantly faster. So when you look from a return on investment perspective over a time horizon, and whatever that is, 5 years or whatever, you go, well, if we double down here, our return on investment is going to be far greater than trying to enter in a very larger market, but also very more complicated market in the US, which we don't know, which you're really going to fumble about for a few years until you get your bearings and all that.
Yeah.
But I came to a realization was that doubling down for me means I want to become number one in what we do. And that number one really manifested itself and said, what does number one mean? And so why, I guess you can ask, why do you want to be number one? Well, I guess there's a number of things and theories around it, like unless you're the first or the second in the market, don't be in the market. But number one, if you are number one, you would know that, and we have all these great aspirations of all these fancy technology companies. But if you're number one, business will flock to you. People will buy that Apple iPhone or whatever it is because they think it's number one, it's the best they want, and they want it. And so business will exponentially grow without the extra effort, because suddenly people call you. The other part of number one is, and again, I'll use Apple, you can charge more for it too. So you actually have a price competition point in that as well, because people really want it and they're willing to pay more for it. So not only do you grow faster, you also make better returns. So that was the decision at the time, where I said, well, one was a family thing, but then I also, again, I saw the opportunity. I saw where the business was positioned, and if I put the efforts here, then we'll have a greater return. And probably, like you mentioned before, it was probably another one of those bigger decisions. I could have gone that way or that way, but then analyzing really the facts and making the plan led me to make the decision to stay here and double down. And look, and we're still on the path to become number one. And that certainly keeps us focused. It's a great driver.
That's awesome. And and it really requires, to your earlier point around the long-term orientation from the early days, it actually really requires the long-term orientation, because you're thinking, well, I could kind of cut a corner here and I could maybe cut a corner there. And you're like, no, if I've got a really long-term orientation around this business, I have to build, there is no choice. I will not get to number one without some real differentiation that's defensible, that's hard to compete with, and some advantages that are going to be, when everyone looks at us and goes, I don't want to go up against those guys because they've got so much more experience and depth in this sector or with this process or with this part of their value proposition that's actually really takes a lot of time and a lot of money to compete against. So maybe I just won't try. Maybe I'll sort of go around them, and it sort of creates that moat around it as well, doesn't it?
It's a commitment. It's definitely definitely a commitment, and it doesn't mean that overseas is off the table forever. But it just wasn't right at that point in time because of that opportunity we had.
What have you learned, Mark, about your own leadership over this time? Because not many people end up on a trajectory where they've ended up the CEO or the managing director and the founder of a company that's got to 4,000 people. And the style of leadership and the frameworks and the thinking around leadership really changes. I mean, you see a lot of founders get off that wagon a lot earlier and go, this business is too big for me. I didn't want to be involved in running a company of this size, because, you obviously get further away from the coalface, often further away from clients and so on. And I don't see that often people, succeed and continue to grow and enjoy the growth that continues, or that is necessary all the way up through that chain. What have you learned about your own leadership, and what is it that you have? What is it that you've learned that's allowed you to continue to succeed through those different material changes in employee size and therefore structure of organization, focus of organization?
Oh, that's a good question, but yeah. So look, I haven't changed as a person the way I am. I've always been very hardworking. That's just my nature, really. So I think that's a key ingredient, that you're willing to work hard, because as the company grows bigger, the people want to see that the one who leads the company is still working hard and it's not just faffing about and does whatever he does. So that was probably helpful in that context, that I actually can't help myself. But look, I think the learning, Sean, really it's the learning of new things. As your business grows, you're presented with different challenges all the time. And obviously, a key element in terms of learning new things is the decision to get someone into your current job or part of your current job, right? Because it's you really need to grow out of that all the time. When you're fast growing, it's relentless. You always need to make sure that you have someone in your team, or get new team members who can ultimately take a part of your job away, and then the focus on them to get into the job rather than me getting out of the job. I think that's important, because once they're into the job, you have nowhere else to go to get out of the job and do something else. So learning's been a key element for me. Like lifelong learning is it's an ingrained passion. And obviously I read a lot of books, but you learn a lot by meeting a lot of people as well, and constantly move into new areas. So me as a person, I have a personality of I love to explore the unknown. So through that, we have done things in our business where we go, I have no idea how this works, but let's go and figure it out, and let's put some effort and planning into it, and then execute well. And that's been always very joyful, because that's what created who we are today, because we do so much more than what we originally did. So in that context, yeah, look, I hold myself very strongly to account. That's the important element. As a leader, I have to be able to lead this company. When the day comes where I can't lead the company, I'll have to move out and get someone in to do it.
Yeah. Well, I imagine, the openness to learning is such a big part of it, and it's also the openness, to discomfort, maybe for want of a better word, because each of those, uncomfortable situations, the reason I think a lot of the founders tend to get off that wagon is because they end up in a whole bunch of situations that actually make them quite uncomfortable. And so you can either sort of retreat to the stuff that you're really good at, then maybe, go somewhere and do it again. And you see lots of people do, multiple business ventures over a shorter period of time because they've hit the limit of maybe it's because of what they enjoyed, but maybe it's also sometimes because they're ending up in a situation where they don't want to keep learning. They can see what they already know is very effective. And so they'd almost rather leverage of what's already effective for them rather than go through the discomfort of actually having to really learn and change, which is required if you're going to continue to scale up an organization to the size that you've been in.
Definitely, that's a requirement. I guess the other part in that one for me was I never stopped being entrepreneurial. And I think as an entrepreneur, you start your business for a reason. Is it either you want to be in control of your own destiny, or you just like to scrap away from something with something? And I've been able to maintain a strong entrepreneurial foundation in the business. Obviously, as it gets larger, you really need to put a lot of management in to make sure it's managed in its best possible way. But we have a lot of entrepreneurial freedom in the organization, and that still gets me excited. So I don't feel like I need to go and start a new venture to get that feeling, because I can actually do that within your own business in certain areas and certain elements of it, and that still stimulates me every day.
Beautiful, yeah. The context of, I guess, sort of intrapreneurship rather than entrepreneurship, the ability to continue to innovate inside the company. That is awesome. Marc, I'm conscious that we are close to time. I would like you to sort of sail out now to much further out in the future. I want you to imagine that you're all the way out in your yearning years, and you've built Protech to whatever size that you wanted it to get to. You've taken on as many challenges as you wanted to from a business perspective, and you've really achieved everything that you've ever wanted. And the CEO of the world's largest global community of first-time founders, there's tens of millions of them around the world, around this brand. They're all sort of hungry for wisdom, and they're looking at all the things that you've achieved over this time and thinking, if there was just three things I could get, excuse me, from Marc, the three things that Marc thinks founders need to get right if they want to scale, above all else, what would they be for you? What are the three things that you think founders really need to get right if they want to scale?
I know it sounds often quite a little bit cliche, but the purpose of the business, is important, and I didn't know that at the time. Actually, my first sentence on the business plan, which was no plan at the time, was the purpose we still have today, and it was a very simple statement, and that is in the context of the interaction of the industry we're in. But it was to be a positive influence in people's lives, and that sounds very corny in that sense, but that purpose has taken on its own life in the organization and empowers everyone each and every day to do exactly that. If they're at the decision point, they're not quite sure what they should be doing it, that's the lens they look through, and they know the answers. But for me also, that's always giving me a satisfactory element to do exactly that. And we have built many things around the company to do and achieve that. And if it doesn't achieve that, we have a mission to change it and really improve that. So a purpose is important because it keeps it alive, it keeps it real, it keeps it human in my business. And it gives us a lot of joy as an organization and a buy-in. So that's one thing. But vision, clearly the vision, and not being afraid to change the vision, and because there's some elements there, and then sometimes it changes, and then obviously as you get bigger, the vision gets bigger because you learn more, and suddenly you go, geez, I can actually do that, where you never thought about it when we're smaller. But keep the vision alive, and and no doubt many of your listeners would have listened to or read the books of Jim Collins and the B hacks, which is aligned to your vision, so a big hairy audacious goals. I remember I put that out 10 years ago, which we will be achieving next year with 5,000 employees. And I remember back then my team looked at me and they go, yeah,
Probably
whatever.
laughing. Yeah.
And I was a very lonely dancer in the room there at the time. But I actually manifested this in a visual format, and I have kept that in my office ever since. And every day I walk into that office, I know what I'm trying to achieve. And unconsciously, your mind will start to strive towards that vision. So if you haven't got a vision, then your mind is never going to achieve its potential to actually trying to find solutions along the way. And you will never jump from A to Z in one hit. There's many steps in between, but trying to envisage where it can be is a key element. And long-term view, being patient, which I'm not. My people will say, you're not patient at all, but in many ways I am, because I know no good things happen easy or quickly. And putting that in place and being convinced about it with a good plan, and then stay the course, and do everything you can. So visionary, have the ideas, stay the course. And you mentioned that before, there's many left and rights, up and downs along the way. But ultimately, each and every day, we all work very, very hard in our businesses. We all put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in it. And ultimately, we'll achieve it. And that's very satisfying to that. But purpose is important because business grows. And once you have the next level, there'll be the next level. And then there's another level, and there's another level. And to keep the satisfaction and the fun in it, purpose has guided me through those levels.
I love that, mate. That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. Mark, I'd love to just acknowledge the way that you've built this business over 16 years. I mean, it really is a staggering trajectory to get in 16 years from where you were to 400 million plus. I mean, and it's not about the number, but to your point, it's about the soul of your business and the purpose of your business to actually have that positive impact and to become number one, so that actually you can increase your ability to succeed in achieving your purpose is only possible through scale. And so it's not scale for the sake of scale and for the sake of money. It's actually scale because it's got a reason. And that's not an easy thing to imbue in a culture when you have that many people. But I can tell that given the way that's driven you over the period of time, that's part of the nature and the DNA of who you are. And I expect you've imbued that really well through your leaders and been able to sort of filter that down nicely through the organization. So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure for me to get to interview you today, and I'm sure that our audience has got a lot of value out of that. How can people get in touch or follow along with what you or the company are doing?
Yeah, so look, just reach out. I guess very simple. I'm on LinkedIn. The company is called Protech, Protech. Just send me an email. Or just give me a call. You find my number. I don't have anywhere to hide. And just feel free to reach out. I know how it is in the pursuit of growth, and you're looking for answers. And one thing I've never hesitated is ask questions of people who have walked the path before me. And there's no difference. And anyone who might have some questions around it, just reach out, not just to myself, but any of the business leaders. And I'm sure you'll be received very well, and everyone is happy to share.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Marc. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed the show today. Huge thanks to Marc Meili from Protech. Before you go, of course, if you've enjoyed today, feel free to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Our team absolutely love getting to read those. We like hearing what you love. We like hearing what else you might like to hear about. We obviously love the reviews. You can jump on the website and register your email there if you'd like to know when new podcasts are going to drop. Of course, you can subscribe on the podcasting platforms. You can find us on all the socials on @scaleupspodcast.com. But to everyone listening today, Marc's story has been such a great example of this. The only thing you've heard Marc has had in his office, his vision that he's looked at every single day. The only thing that can guarantee that you won't be able to scale in the future is giving up along the way. And it's so easy to do because stuff gets hard, but you've got to stay unshakable in your faith. You've got to have a real reason to be in business, and you've got to remain flexible in your approach, or stay the course. As Marc said, be willing to tack and change, but stay the course. You've been listening to the Scale Ups podcast. I'm Steele, and I look forward to speaking with you again next week. Thanks again so much, Marc.
Thank you, Sean.
G'day everyone, just a couple of quick things before you go. If you have questions that you'd love myself or an upcoming guest to tackle about challenges that you're facing in scaling your business, please just jump straight on the website, scaleupspodcast.com. You can record your message straight from your mobile by hitting the button on the right-hand side of the page, or you can just email them the old-fashioned way, questions@scaleupspodcast.com. And just a quick reminder, nothing we spoke about today constitutes financial or business advice. If you are considering making big decisions in your business, seek out a professional who can look at your situation in detail and make sure you're getting sound, personalised advice. Thanks for listening. Look forward to being back in your podcast feed next week.